Welcome back. For this module on Natsume Soseki, you're about to read his Kokoro, the greatest novel that he wrote, arguably the greatest novel any Japanese writer ever wrote. High praise, indeed. No writer has been more highly esteemed by the Japanese than Natsume Soseki. There are his years, 1867, 1916. You get right, he's born right before the Meiji period, dies right after the end of it. The novel you will read reflects this time span. The vast majority of Japanese readers, though not necessarily all authors, would surely name him as the greatest Japanese writer of modern times. His early works enjoy immense popularity for lots of reasons. The stories are really compelling. He has a really interesting and easy to read style. The themes are compelling and easily identifiable. They're just really good stories with people that you come to care about. The two trilogies written in his middle years are considered by many to be the finest portrayals of intellectuals living in Japan that have been brutally thrust into the 20th century, and this captures then the theme now you've heard from the other two stories that you read for the last module as well. Stories that capture works of art that reflect and represent what it meant to be Japanese in a rapidly changing world, and that's why we're looking at them here. There are a number of reasons for Soseki's popularity. For one, he was a master of prose. For another, he is very successful in the way that he develops stories. His technical skill and his sense of story development has endeared him to the Japanese reading public and to a non-Japanese public as well. As I hinted last time, whereas Ogai brought us contemporary psychological development as characters, and Soseki will do the same, it is Soseki's writing style that looks familiar. It set the tone. It is a Japanese that is recognizable to you if you go to Japan and read Japanese documents now. Some of the skill is attributable to Soseki's study of English literature. He was a master of English literature, a scholar of English writing. He was one of the first Japanese in the Meiji period to be sent overseas by the government to study. A number of bright students were sent to study in European countries in the Meiji era in order to gain knowledge that the government felt was crucial for modernizing the nation. We mentioned last time, Ogai went to Germany. Soseki went to England. He was there from 1900 to 1901. As mentioned last time, whereas Ogai loved his experience, Soseki hated his. Soseki was apparently prone to melancholy. Also, he had very little money. He was very lonely. The government stipend was not sufficient to give him the life that he should have expected. He found it hard to make friends with the British. He returned to Japan quite disillusioned with England and by extension Europe. He found the British to be crass and commercial, money-grubbing, and interested only in capitalistic success. He thus becomes one of the first Japanese writers and intellectuals to actively question the modernization that Japan had embarked on. Again, mentioned this last time, it comes up with Ogai as well. Soseki had serious doubts concerning the direction of modernization. He questions whether Japan was the best served by going in the direction of a country like England, and this amplifies important discussions going on at this radically changing time in Japanese history. At the same time, he's borrowed much. His fiction reflects much that he's learned from British and European style novels, right? The development, the way the plot line develops, the storyline, interactions between characters. At the same time, much of his success is attributable to what he borrowed from the Japanese past, especially the oral comedic storytellers of the Edo Tokugawa era, a time of very robust and developed oral storytelling traditions. And so in this novel, in Kokoro also, we will see this sense of humor, especially the dry comedy and the almost slapstick element in many of the scenes that you will come across. One of the main issues in Soseki's writing is what does it mean to be an individual, something that's highly praised in the West, something that in America we still talk about all the time, finding out who one is. But as Soseki rightly points out, before one can ask, who am I, one must be able to answer, what is an I? And this is by no means an easy, it would seem obvious to most of you. It was not so for the Japanese and for many non-Western traditions figuring out what it meant to exist as an individual in society. In other words, for example, one way to hone this, what is one's relationship to one's family? How is one connected to a community? what defines a community. These are all very familiar to us, and as you read Kokoro, you will understand, and I expect you will identify with this young college student's trying to situate himself both within the city and new communities and his family back in the country. Soseki had studied English from middle school. He was exceedingly proficient at it. We still have some surprisingly fluid transitions of traditional Japanese fiction that he did from the Japanese into English while he was a student. In all of this, though, he felt a great sense of inadequacy concerning his work with a foreign language, and some of this is justified. His mostly negative remembrances of England seemed to stem from the fact that he knew that no matter how well he mastered English, and with it English literature, he would never be accepted on the same level as an English scholar. Right? Were Soseki to do all of his writing in English, all of us would know his name because of what an incredibly proficient, prolific writer, what a powerful thinker, what an intelligent man he was. The fact that he wrote in Japanese means that very few of you will have known of him, and you only come to him through Japanese. In other words, he's right about this prejudicial development, this prejudicial structure of the world. It's his experience of discrimination is profound. This anxiety and fear in relation to the West is one of the ways in which many Japanese readers come to feel an affinity with Soseki's work. Right? This is an ongoing concern of Japan, as I mentioned at the outset, how to make one's way in the world, how to situate oneself in a world in which the rules were changing, how to be Asian in a world that thinks of itself, how to situate oneself in the world where Asian values are subsumed to Western ones. And chief among all of these was a fear that the Japanese culture and way of doing things was going to be lost forever in the face of an encroaching Western way of doing things. Right? At heart here is a real fear about a loss of identity and culture. These are the fears that haunt Soseki's novels, appear to have haunted Soseki the man, and would also appear to haunt many of the Japanese readers, especially at the time of the early 20th century. And so you'll find by the end of this novel, not only is Sensei dead, but so is an era. An era has passed, and this is another one of the powerful themes that comes up with Soseki, the way that he lived Meiji, essentially born at its beginning and dying at its end. And also this narrator, right, who was unable to tell anyone about the past, as you will find. So, this novel, in many ways, as you will discover and we'll talk about in your assignments, serves as a way to articulate the anxieties and the confusions that many find in the Meiji era. Again, it's another reason why we often identify Kokoro as a representative Meiji work.